It's the 5th anniversary of the Arab uprising.
The government has stepped up its crackdown by arresting dozens of activists.
Egyptian security forces have detained dozens of Facebook users.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we're tracking this week. Egypt, where the Arab Spring is a distant memory and the news media struggle under the Sisi government. Britain, journalists, government surveillance, and the new law that's in the works. The Taliban targets journalism in Afghanistan. 7 are killed, dozens more wounded. And turning beans into caviar. Delusions and illusions 5 years after the fall of Mubarak. 5 years ago, in January of 2011, Tahrir Square, Cairo was the dateline. The fall of the Mubarak government was the story. Images of the revolution were watched around the world. Fast forward to 2016, and the message being issued by the Egyptian authorities and broadcast by the news media there is clear. Do not take to the streets. Last week, 5 people who started Facebook pages marking the anniversary of the revolution were arrested, accused of supporting the now banned Muslim Brotherhood. According to press freedom groups, the number of journalists in Egyptian jails is at an all-time high. As the NGO Human Rights Watch puts it, we're seeing a pattern of security agencies arresting people whose writings don't conform to official views. The bulk of the mainstream news media in Egypt did align itself with President Sisi against the Muslim Brotherhood. But now that that organization has been forced underground, there are some signs that the media's Sisi mania is waning. Cracks are beginning to show, with both TV and print outlets rediscovering some of their critical faculties on matters of governance, corruption, and economic policy. Still, there are limits, and those who cross them risk much more than just their jobs. Our starting point this week, 5 years after the revolution that represented the high watermark of the Arab Spring, is Cairo. Anniversaries. The news media love them. Some governments have reason to fear them. And as January 25th approached, marking 5 years since the Mubarak regime was swamped in a sea of protests, the Sisi government put the word out, and the Egyptian media echoed it, that history would not be allowed to repeat itself.
اعمل حسابك نازل الشارع حاجة من الاثنين يا تتسجن يا تتقتل.
In print, the headlines were equally ominous. Live bullets will be used against saboteurs on the 25th, and mosque orators demonstrating Islam.
The media, the pro-government media, continues to drum up that same sort of sentiment. And anyone who calls for, not even protest, but calls for the recognition of January 25th as an important date is represented as either a member of or a sympathizer of the banned Muslim Brotherhood, now described as a terrorist organization.
There's all this, fear-mongering about how that day, if it's going to be observed with any kind of protest, is going to be a cause for a lot of instability and a lot of danger. The Al-Ahram newspaper, which is Egypt's flagship state newspaper, talking about all the security measures that the Interior Ministry is going to be taking in order to protect Egyptians.
January 25th has been fully appropriated by the state to the extent that now it might be a celebrated event as the first revolution to be followed by the June 30th revolution. I don't think there is a build-up of a narrative in the media to scare people of what might happen. Rather, a pacified, almost non-fear-instilling policy of the day.
What some have called a clampdown on the media ahead of the anniversary is actually the continuation of the Sisi government's policies going back more than 2 years. The U.S.-based Committee to Protect Journalists reports that at the end of 2015, Egypt was second only to China in the number of journalists jailed.
But in recent weeks, it's intensified. Started with a very recent high-profile case of Hossein Bahgat. He's a prominent journalist now with the independent news site Madamas. He was detained late last year by military intelligence for an in-depth article he wrote about the military trial of a number of officers in the army who had allegedly attempted to mount a coup.
The arrest in Hurghada of an Egyptian investigative journalist and researcher called Ismail Skandarani. He had been speaking and writing on Egypt's security policy, especially in the Sinai, and he is now facing a slew of criminal charges.
And we see those examples happen across the board. Arrests from the online publication Masr al-Arabiya and elsewhere. So these have been across the board, happening sporadically in waves, but the intention here is to essentially instill the kind of fear that existed after 2013 in the hearts of most journalists.
So yes, there is a concerted campaign against freedom of expression in Egypt. But that campaign is not intimidating all journalists. There are many brave voices that remain in Egypt, and despite all the risks, they continue to call out what they see is wrong.
For the most part, those voices can be found in print or online. Like most governments with authoritarian approaches to journalism, Egypt is far more tolerant of what is published in a newspaper than what is said in front of a camera and broadcast through the most influential medium that there is, television. TV journalists still have red lines they won't dare cross. Criticism of the president himself
or the measures taken by the security apparatus. But they have started to take shots at the Sisi government's performance in other areas, for reasons that may have less to do with ideology or politics than pure old-fashioned concerns over their own bottom lines.
It's now post just being anxious about protecting the state, it is now anxious about losing the viewers altogether. Lamis al-Hadidi has been really on and off.
كان في صورة مثيرة جدا ازاي كده؟ ده انت وسط الجيش المصري. هو انت خايف من الجيش المصري؟
The discourse on Egyptian television is much more diversified than it seems from outside. It's much more because they can't afford it otherwise.
The passion for Sisi started to wane when people realized that no real change was being instigated, that corruption was just as widespread as it was beforehand, that brutality increased, that crackdowns became more vicious in order for the state to try and maintain a semblance of control over the population. And this is reflected somewhat in the mainstream media.
I don't believe there are any cracks between the alignment of Sisi and the mainstream media at all. Even though you would get the occasional criticism of some kind of policy or critique of a new law that was passed, there is no real fissure between them. The point is that Sisi and his regime are very aware of the power of the media. And they're also very aware of the fact there needs to be this semblance of freedom. There needs to be a little bit of space where people can perhaps criticize something. And it's part of their program.
And the authorities are proving to be hypersensitive to online platforms like Facebook, which was such a big part of the Arab Spring story, not just as a news distribution vehicle, but as an organizing tool. That spate of arrests of Egyptians who started Facebook pages to commemorate the January 25th anniversary is evidence that 5 years later, social media and the segment of the population that uses it most are both worth watching.
60% of the Egyptian population is under the age of 35, and they are much more engaged online than they are in participating politically. So social media may not be a game changer, or it may not mobilize people into the streets the way it did in 2011, but nevertheless it is a critical part.
And that, in a nutshell, in a soundbite, is the Egyptian journalist's dilemma. How to mark a date that was a game changer without the critical part. Watch this space, and watch Egypt's media on January 25th as they watch their words.
On the download now, our viewers weigh in on the state of the news media in Egypt.
I truly believe that the only chance for pluralism in Egypt comes from we come from social media. There are many hashtag campaigns that were pretty successful in basically raising awareness on cases of activists and fairly detailed, and in some cases they even managed to get this activist and journalist released. And the second role that social media are playing in Egypt is monitoring the mainstream journalists and media TV personalities, most of which are completely aligned in favor of the regime.
The majority of voices that have appeared in Egypt after the Arab Spring on social and traditional media have really been silent. And crucially, the international audience that was very engaged with Egypt after the Arab Spring has now lost interest. Following the nationalistic fervor that happened around Sisi's election, people are now realizing that, poverty and corruption continue to be a problem, and this will feature in the media until these problems are solved.
Other media stories that are on our radar this week, at least 7 media workers in Afghanistan have been killed and another 25 wounded in a Taliban suicide bombing in Kabul. A car packed with explosives targeted a minibus owned by a production company affiliated with Tolo News, Afghanistan's first 24-hour news channel. The Taliban had openly threatened Tolo and One TV 3 months ago, calling both channels satanic networks and military targets after they had reported on allegations of summary executions, rape, and kidnapping during the battle for Kunduz. Saad Mohseni, CEO of Tolo's parent company, said the freedom to speak and the right to express ourselves is one that Afghans have fought too long for. The voices of those who we have lost will not be forgotten, and the voice of Afghanistan will not be silenced by this incident. The war in Yemen is taking its toll on journalists. A leading freelance reporter has been killed, and a 3-man crew from Al Jazeera Arabic has gone missing. Al-Migdad Mojali was freelancing for Voice of America when he perished in an airstrike in Sana'a on January 17th. The Al Jazeera team, Hamdi al-Bukhari, Abdul Aziz al-Sabri, and Monir al-Sabai, was last seen January 18th. They are believed to have been kidnapped in the southern city of Taiz. Al Jazeera's Director General said it's tragic that in times of conflict, news organizations continue to be targeted. Journalists should have the freedom to do their work without the fear of intimidation, abduction, or unlawful arrest. Meanwhile, Jason Rezaian, the Washington Post's Tehran correspondent, was finally freed last week after a prisoner exchange following a year and a half spent in an Iranian jail. The first footage of Rezaian came from a U.S. military hospital in Germany. His wife was showing him a video produced in Persian, skewering the idea that he was a spy. Rezaian saw the humor in it. He was convicted at a closed-door trial in Tehran of espionage and crimes against national security, accusations that the reporter and his newspaper have always denied. The prisoner exchange came as last July's nuclear agreement between the Islamic Republic and the world's major powers was being implemented, lifting sanctions on Iran. Some major American news outlets, including the Washington Post, CNN, and the Wall Street Journal, have all acknowledged that they knew about the prisoner swap negotiations, which they said went on for close to a year, but chose not to report on the story to protect the safety of those involved. And the veil is slowly being lifted on a mysterious story involving 5 missing publishers from Hong Kong, one of whom has now appeared on state television in China, confessing to a 12-year-old crime that has nothing to do with his work. Gui Minhai, who was living in Thailand and went missing 3 months ago, popped up on Chinese television on January 17th. The crime he admitted to was a drunken hit-and-run accident in the Chinese city of Ningbo in 2003. Gui and 4 of his colleagues at a Hong Kong-based publishing house called Mighty Current all disappeared over the past few months. Mighty Current specializes in tabloid-style political books critical of Beijing, books that are banned in China. There is no official record of Gui leaving Thailand, which fed suspicions that the 5 were abducted by Chinese authorities. The day after Gui's appearance, Chinese authorities in Guangdong confirmed they have another of the publishers in their custody, Li Bo, who went missing in Hong Kong 3 weeks ago. The British government is in the midst of rewriting the country's laws on surveillance and national security through a piece of legislation called the Investigatory Powers Bill, or the IPB. And journalists have a big stake in this story. Over the past decade and a half, ever since the 9/11 attacks, the UK Parliament has invoked more than 65 different laws and measures to be used ostensibly to fight crime or terrorism. However, the ramifications for British reporters have included stop-and-search requests while on the job, mining of their digital data, secret monitoring of their communications, as well as evidence that some reporters have somehow ended up on police databases used to track extremists. This is all now coming to a head as Parliament debates the IPB, referred to by its critics as the Snoopers Charter. It's designed to pull together all laws governing how the government, police, and intelligence services can spy on citizens, including those in the media. Listening Post's Philip Phillips now on surveillance measures in the UK and the relationship between the security state and the journalists who dare to challenge it.
Jason Parkinson is a British freelance video journalist who has been covering protest and documenting dissent for more than 10 years. He has all kinds of stories of journalists being intimidated, harassed, assaulted, even put under surveillance by special teams deployed by UK police forces, specifically to gather intelligence.
It was starting to become very, very difficult for me to actually even get to a job where there was going to be police and police intelligence, because I would routinely be stopped.
Such amount of place gives me the power to keep you here, to detain for the purpose of the search.
A lot of the time it was to stop and count, sometimes it was stop and search. Around 2007, I think there was 21 to 23 stops.
Well, you've got the choice, okay? You either go away now or you spend the rest of the afternoon yourself. What do you want to do?
I always thought, even back in 2007, there's something going on here, and it's taken nearly 10 years of suspicion to actually now find out that there was something going on. Information has been held and retained, and these officers and these units know who we are, know who we're talking to, and know what we're doing.
So you got here,
Parkinson says a couple of years ago, a letter from London's Metropolitan Police landed on his doorstep, a response to something he had filed called a subject access request. Proof that he was indeed under surveillance because of the kind of work he does, and that information on him is being held on a number of domestic extremist databases.
The domestic extremism database is one of the most outrageous interferences with general civil liberties in this country, when you consider that journalists need to be at those places in order to do their job. And the fact that that somehow casts a veil of suspicion over them, I think, is really undermining the values that we would prize in this democracy.
Parkinson and 5 of his colleagues are now taking legal action against Scotland Yard, challenging the police's right to collect and retain their data, asking the court to order their files be erased and a policy established to protect all journalists from future state surveillance. Few of these incidents make news. One that is relates to the leaks from former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. David Miranda, partner of Glenn Greenwald, who broke the Snowden story in the Guardian newspaper, was detained at Heathrow Airport under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act. He was held for 9 hours by security forces who seized his computer material. This past week, British judges ruled that Miranda's detention was legal under UK law, but incompatible with Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, the section dealing with freedom of expression. Miranda and his many supporters claimed victory.
It was just an excuse to search him over and take whatever he had with him to find out what Snowden might have given away about Britain. And then we also had the Sun newspaper, normally a friend and proponent of police activity, found itself the target of disproportionate intrusive surveillance in order to combat reputational damage to the police. That is nothing to do with national security. It is an abuse of the protections of the press under the Convention on Human Rights. It should be unlawful and should be punished. But my recollection last time I looked was they got away with it.
David Omand is the former director of GCHQ, the communications headquarters of the UK's Intelligence and Security Setup.
GCHQ will be perfectly entitled to obtain that metadata if they have sufficient purpose.
He is one of Britain's most experienced so-called securocrats, prepared to go on the record in defence of what he calls necessary and proportionate counter-terrorism measures relating to journalists.
You just have to get the mechanics right. And so the public's got to have confidence that it gives these powerful tools of legal authority to the police and intelligence agencies. It will be used responsibly. And so you've got to have some kind of oversight of public trust. You've got to be certain that when powers are used, they are used responsibly.
Which brings us to the new Investigatory Powers Bill, or IPB, currently being debated in committee rooms behind me. In putting together the current draft, the Cameron government asked an independent reviewer to scrutinise more than 65 different pieces of existing terrorism legislation in an attempt to bring together all relevant surveillance measures under one law, overarching and transparent.
What is being said to the public and Parliament in Britain right now is trust us, trust the judges, trust the system, and many people want to. But what we have seen from the record is that over the period of 30, 40 years, they cannot be trusted.
I find the IPB petrifying. It expands the powers drastically. It expands hacking powers of the police and of the intelligence agencies, expands mass surveillance powers, and journalists are not given any specific protections under any of those new laws. So while the intention may have been to make the law clearer, in fact what we're seeing is a huge expansion of powers and no expansion of protection.
The prospect of unfettered state access to everything by human agents, malware planted in your mobile phone, malware planted in your computer, systematic surveillance and automatic networking of everyone you're in touch with is absolutely terrifying. And one uses this analogy hesitatingly from the point of view of a Gestapo or a Stasi. It's a dream come true.
The journalistic shorthand for the IPB is the Snoopers Charter. And that's not just the media critics, but those on the security side are pushing ahead.
I gave evidence to the different committees of the House of Commons. I couldn't find any gaps. No doubt the journalists, for example, will want tighter conditions under which journalistic material could be accessed. The authorities equally will probably push back against that. Actually, the most important thing is not what's on the face of the Act, it's the code of practice. That explains in plain English what the authorities are allowed to do and what they're not. So I think it will be much clearer for anyone who is worried about whether the state is going too far. They may still argue about it, but at least they'll all be arguing from knowing what they're talking about.
The British government is hoping to have the IPB passed by the end of the year. Its advocates are heralding its transparency, this idea that journalists will know when they're being surveilled and why. But the critics are concerned about something much more fundamental, the future of journalism in the UK.
Journalists are really feeling the effects of mass surveillance. I think that its impacts will probably be long-term, and we'll only really come to realise the implications of building this surveillance society, looking back in 10, 15 years' time and trying to understand why we didn't have as many investigatory journalists out there, why we didn't have as many exposés, why we didn't have as many whistleblowers, why we didn't have as many sources coming forward. I think that those are really the tangible impacts that we're going to see in the long term.
Finally, revolutions and music tend to go hand in hand. 5 years ago, when Egyptians were ousting President Hosni Mubarak, one of the voices of that revolution was Rami Assam. Back then, his musical battle cry was bread, freedom, and social justice. But both he and his country have since moved on. Assam has relocated to Sweden, and Egypt now has another former military man in charge. Last year, Assam released Beans Are Caviar. The message being that Egyptians, in their enthusiasm for the Sisi government, are mistaking a basic food staple for something of gourmet value. We'll see you next time here at the Listening Post.
عينك قاعد في الضل بيولع سماوي يبارك لك ربنا في الكرسي ويديك على قد ما تدي هشتكنا وبشتكنا وعادي وايادي تسلم لايادي ايه يعني وماله مفيش مانع وفي كل حالاتك انا راضي داخليه تفض مظاهرات والوضع جميل وديمقراط تاتا وجنب الحتماش وهكمل عمري وانا مطاط من حال الناس انا على احتار الناس بتشوف الفول كافيار يا ليلي يا ليلي يا ليلي لو تلا حكومة بقدرة نار الناس بتقول قشطة استقرار قشطة استقرار من حال الناس انا على الاحتار الناس بتشوف الفول كافيار
I put a